Hi everyone, this is Dr. Fox, and let's talk about the tracheobronchial tree. In this video, we'll outline the conductive pathway from the larynx to the terminal bronchioles, noting regions of the tracheobronchial tree and their structure and relationships. For example, the primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi, and conducting terminal and respiratory bronchioles. Let's begin with the trachea. The trachea is suspended from the larynx by the cricotracheal ligament. How exquisitely well named. The trachea runs anterior to the esophagus. So if you need to access the airway, you may do so directly under the skin without having to go through the gastrointestinal tract. It consists of a tube which is covered by hyaline cartilage rings. We call these tracheal cartilages, and they are anterolateral surrounding the trachea. Wherever there is not tracheal cartilages, meaning posteriorly, there is smooth muscle or trachealis muscle. So to look at a cross-section of this as a U, that solid U would be the tracheal cartilages, and this dashed line would be the trachealis muscle. At the level of the thoracic plane, so that's just posterior to the sternal angle or the angle of Louis, back to the intervertebral disc of T4, T5, we have the bifurcation of the trachea into right and left primary bronchi. Now this illustration doesn't show it very well, but the right primary bronchus tends to be larger and more vertically oriented than the left primary bronchus, which is slimmer and more oblique. So here we can get a better view of the trachealis muscle. So anterior would be this way. There is an example of one of those tracheal rings, and we can see the trachealis muscle there. We can also see the rings incised and then rotated about, and then here is the trachealis muscle posteriorly. Because it is largely comprised of smooth muscle, it is under autonomic control, and so a sympathetic response will relax this. This is in part why people administer epinephrine to ward off any effects of anaphylaxis during a hypersensitivity response. So let's take a look at the tracheobronchial tree in its totality here. So here is the trachea, and the trachea is going to bifurcate into primary bronchi, left and right. At the point where they do bifurcate, there is a ridge of cartilage called the carina. Carina means keel, like the keel of a ship, and the mucosa there is densely innervated, such that if any foreign bodies were to traverse the trachea and hit that, it would trigger a coughing reflex, hopefully to expel the foreign body out of the conductive pathway. Those primary bronchi are going to bifurcate or multifurcate into secondary or lobar bronchi. So primary bronchi serve lungs, secondary bronchi serve lobes of lungs. So there are two secondary bronchi that serve the left lung and three which serve the right lung. That's because the left lung has two lobes, the right lung has three. Those secondary bronchi will multifurcate into tertiary bronchi, oftentimes called segmental bronchi. They're called segmental bronchi because they serve bronchopulmonary segments. Within bronchopulmonary segments, those tertiary bronchi are going to multifurcate into bronchioles. So bronchioles are a large category of small tubes within the lungs. So as we move proximally to distally, what happens is the hyaline cartilage rings diminish and the amount of smooth muscle increases as we move farther along distally, and such that when we're in the bronchioles, it's all smooth muscle. Those bronchioles are served by bronchial arteries, so that's part of systemic circulation, as we'll discuss. Let's take a look at bronchopulmonary segments. These are the portions of the lungs which are served by tertiary bronchi. They have their own unique blood supply, therefore they are surgically resectable, meaning a bronchopulmonary segment can be surgically excised, removed, and the remainder of the lung may function in a healthy manner. Now, there are various bronchopulmonary segments, and it's really beyond all measure of expectation for you to learn them all. And so what I would like to do is focus on a very special relationship of a bronchopulmonary segment that can be found on each lung. And that is the superior bronchopulmonary segment of the inferior lobe. So the superior segment of the inferior lobe. And that is because, owing to the unique physical orientation of these tertiary bronchi, the superior segment of the inferior lobe are very susceptible to pneumonia infections, so fluid accumulations there, and individuals who are confined to their bed for extended periods of time. And that is because if you were to see the endocast of this in real life, so in the laboratory, you would note that the superior segments are directed immediately posteriorly. That is to say, if someone is lying flat on their back, like so, they are straight down. And as such, fluid and infection can accumulate in that, making these segments particularly susceptible to infection in someone who is confined to their bed. Now, tertiary bronchi feed into bronchioles. As I've said before, there is no cartilage lining these bronchioles. It's replaced by smooth muscle. Also, mucus glands are confined to regions proximal to this. As smooth muscle is the major constituent of the walls of bronchiole, it is very susceptible to autonomic control, in particular a sympathetic stimulation. It is going to lead to dilation of these bronchioles, or of these small tubes. There are three major types of bronchioles, and these are listed in order from proximal to distal. So first there are conducting bronchioles. Conducting bronchioles multifurcate into terminal bronchioles. Terminal bronchioles multifurcate into respiratory bronchioles. So the division between conducting zones and respiratory zones is between these terminal and respiratory bronchioles, as we'll see. So let's take a look at a terminal bronchiole. The terminal bronchiole comes in and it begins to multifurcate into respiratory bronchioles. The terminal bronchioles have no gas exchange, so they are the most distal part of the conducting zone of the tracheobronchial tree. They are lined by club cells. Club cells have a couple of different functions within the terminal bronchioles. First of all, they are protective, and secondly, they produce a substance known as surfactant. And surfactant helps to reduce surface tension, and this is going to play a large role in the alveoli distally, because that surfactant moves so as to help maintain their structure and prevent them from collapsing on themselves. Also present within terminal bronchioles are reserve cells. These are stem cells, various epithelial that can lie down additional tissues if there is an injury. So the terminal bronchioles multifurcate into the respiratory bronchioles. The respiratory bronchioles are what gives rise to the alveoli. The alveoli are the air sacs where respiration is occurring, or gas exchange between the inside of the respiratory tract and the cardiovascular system. So let's assess our knowledge. At approximately what landmark does the trachea bifurcate into primary bronchi? C4, C5, nope, that's not it. The delta pectoral triangle, nope. The femoral triangle, no, way off. The left, fourth, or fifth intercostal space, well, if you're auscultating maybe the tricuspid valve, yes, but no. The thoracic plane, yes. Immediately behind sternal angle back to intervertebral disc of T4, T5. That is the correct answer. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video. Take care. Bye.